Megha Parekh is my guest today on the Mental Stillness podcast. I'm going to include her full bio in the episode description. It's truly remarkable what she's been able to accomplish and what she's been entrusted with. She's an incredible leader, and you'll see that as you read through her bio. But a couple highlights. She is the Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Officer of the Jacksonville Jaguars. She's been with the organization since 2013. There are so many things that she's responsible for in her role that overlap with legal and business matters. A few of her responsibilities include transactions, acquisitions, investments, risk management, employee growth and development, government relations, technology, security, and stadium and real estate development projects. She plays a central role in shaping the Jaguars' long-term vision and strategy. During her time with the Jaguars, Parekh has worked on the acquisition of Fulham Football Club, the launch of All Elite Wrestling, and the securing of its television broadcast deal, the construction and launch of Daly's Place Amphitheater, and so much more. Prior to joining the Jaguars, Parekh was an attorney in New York. She holds both her undergraduate and graduate law degrees from Harvard, graduating magna cum laude. In addition to her professional leadership, she is deeply committed to community service, and one of the areas I wanted to highlight, and there's more in her bio, but she volunteers with the Crisis Text Line, supporting individuals in moments of mental health crisis. Before we jump into the episode with her, I just want to say thank you to the Jaguars. They invited my family this past weekend to the game where they clinched the division against the Tennessee Titans. And we recorded this episode the day following that victory. And I got to go on the field with my wife and kids and pass football and throw some touchdown passes to my kids.
Even when I first came to the Jaguars, I remember thinking, oh, okay, this type of job is associated with a person who looks like this or drives this kind of a car. It's just never really been me.
Welcome to Mental Stillness. My name is Derek, and I'm excited that somehow you stumbled across this podcast. One of my goals when starting this podcast was to bring mental health conversations into leadership circles. Welcome to Mental Stillness. Really excited about today's guest, Megha. And she's going to introduce herself. And Megha, I would love just share with the audience a little bit of your backstory and how you got to this amazing place that we're sitting in right now. I'll let you share where that is, but go ahead and give a little bit of a backstory.
Sure. So thanks for visiting. So we are currently in the Jaguars stadium after a win yesterday and a
very exciting win.
Division win, which is really great. So exciting time for the team, and I appreciate you being here. So I've been with the team in Jacksonville now since 2013, and I'm currently our EVP and Chief Legal Officer, and also have the benefit of being able to work with our HR, technology, security teams, and am helping to oversee the construction that's also going on around the building right now. So very exciting, busy times. If you'd asked me when I was in New York City, which is where I was right before this, if I would ever be living in Jacksonville, Florida, I would have said not a chance. So I grew up in New Jersey, went to school in Boston, was working in New York at a law firm, and about a year after the acquisition of the team, which was one of the deals that I worked on, they asked me if I'd be interested in coming to Jacksonville. And I remember saying to my dad, I know that, we don't really have any family down there, and I know that I'll be by myself, but I'll probably be there for 2 or 3 years. It'll be a great learning experience, and I'll be back. And 13 years later, I have not gone back for 2 reasons. One, which is the beach, which you experienced yesterday, and it's a wonderful place to live, especially if you like being outside. And what I've found is that it's a lot easier for me in this environment, just with the climate being what it is, to be healthier and more active. But two, on the business side, even just with all the things that I just described, this team has never been just a football team. There's always been so much more opportunity. So shortly after I started, the family purchased Fulham Football Club. After that, we added pools to the stadium, which you can see on the other side, and these giant video boards.
Jackson jumped in yesterday after the game.
Yeah, that's right. We redid the clubs, built an amphitheater just south of here in 2017, launched a pro wrestling company in 2019, and then as you can see across the street, there's also construction going on, which is our new office building and a Four Seasons hotel, and then the stadium itself should be remodeled by August of 28. So it's I feel like I'm constantly learning, which is uncomfortable at times because you don't necessarily get into a perfect groove and have to be pretty agile and curious. But that's what's kept it really interesting. And I appreciate being in an environment where you're challenged, but have the support and resources to always grow and develop.
We talk about being challenged. It sounds like you've also been entrusted.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of big projects. It was funny driving up to the game yesterday. My kids were like, those are a lot of cranes. Are they working on the stadium while the game's going on? I was like, probably not. We drove up today and I was like, the cranes are moving.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of moving parts. And I know that it sounds like you've really been, over 13 years, really been entrusted with a lot of really big projects.
Yeah, I find that when I take a step back, sometimes even I forget because I still think of myself as like some 16-year-old kid on the beach at the Jersey Shore listening to Bon Jovi. And I forget the magnitude of the things that we get to work on or how special they are. But there's no greater compliment at work than being entrusted, as you said, with some of these bigger projects or even just some of the more sensitive things that come up from time to time. It's a great privilege.
Many people who think about professional sports, you think about the people on the field, right? Even today setting up, there's people coming and going and security and all the people cleaning. Like, it's crazy how clean this looks after we were walking out yesterday compared to today. Like, there's a lot of people that make this happen. And so give a little bit of what is it like leading in a professional sports organization? Like, talk about maybe even it's probably nuanced team to team, but like the culture at Jacksonville, give our listeners a little bit of sense because they're all in work cultures. Explain the Jacksonville Jaguars work culture.
Sure. So I'll take your first question just from the sense of a lot of people will ask, and I felt the same way. As a fan, I think about the people on the field or the coaching staff, and you forget about all that goes into it, right? Whether it's from a broadcast perspective, player health and safety, or even for me, which despite wishing that I was more athletic, I am not, and I'm wildly unathletic, but I love sports, and I love it because of how it brings people together. You saw it yesterday in our very full stadium. Gives people something shared to root for and cheer for or agonize over together, which is all still better when you're doing it together. From our perspective at the team, I'd say there's two real hallmarks. One is that we really do believe in winning and losing together, right? So do your part. So you may be the lawyer or the concession stand worker, but in the same way that we expect and want excellence from our players on the field, we want that from everybody in the organization so that everyone feels a part of the wins when they come. And that really in the end is what you would describe as a team, right? People who might have different responsibilities, but all coming together and working together towards a shared goal. The game yesterday was a good example of the benefit of that goal. It's not just the win that the team might have, and thankfully we have another game, but being a small part of watching people make memories. So you were here with your kids, right? Mm-hmm. My hope is that, 10 years from now, they remember that weekend that they had in Jacksonville playing football on the beach and then going to the Jags game. My own life is punctuated by these great moments in sports entertainment. And we talk a lot about how we are not saving lives, but hopefully we are improving people's quality of life, both by the jobs that are created and also by the people that we bring, and making lives memorable.
The record, the team, I'm sure very different this year versus last year. Was there a culture shift internally in the organization as they were more successful on the field?
So I think that the hope is that you have certain fundamental pieces of the business that will sustain whether you are winning or losing. And then the reality is that, yes, everything is easier when you are winning, but we try not to let that serve as an excuse if there are other areas that, we can't control necessarily wins and losses on the field when you're on the business side. And so we try to adhere to that principle of excellence no matter what's going on the field. Mm-hmm. And our hope is that when we win, it's just that much easier and better and more fun for everybody. But also that you don't let the adversity be anything other than a teacher as opposed to an excuse.
My guess is there were some decisions that were made when the team wasn't as successful on the field that allowed this year to happen.
Yeah.
Leadership, we talked even before we started recording, like leadership always exposes itself. And sometimes that's a good thing or maybe an unhealthy thing or a bad thing. And so when you think about leading in this organization, especially NFL, absolutely there's men and women, but predominantly male leadership. That's at least what's publicized and out there. I'm sure there's phenomenal female leaders, but at the executive level, what does female leadership look like in the NFL?
It's difficult to speak sort of broadly because what I like to think about is the fact that, even amongst the men, there are different types of leaders. And so I think of it less in terms of that just straight gender axis and more of I am naturally a more introverted person. I am not the best at thinking or speaking contemporaneously. I really like to process and prepare. And my hope,
Sound like a lawyer.
yeah, fair. And so my hope is that though what we can do is bring together complementary leadership styles. So I'm not necessarily the first one to speak. I'm not necessarily the loudest voice, but I hope that because I tend to process and sometimes to a fault, right? Sometimes you can be the person who processes too much and also need to be driven to action. My hope is that if you can blend those types of leadership styles together, that will help. I do think that having people from different backgrounds who think differently, and for me, yeah, like one of the defining pieces of it is that obviously when people see me, they have all kinds of assumptions about my background or how I got here or whatever else it might be. My hope is that by showing them that there's you can look a little bit different and maybe approach things a little bit differently, but still have a spot at the table. My hope is that allows everybody to realize, male or female, that you don't need to fit into some sort of rigid definition of what a leader acts or looks or thinks like. And I think that helps because you also have employees who are all different. And so some may resonate with different work styles or different leadership styles. People are generally inspired by different types of things. And so I think that if you can bring together different styles and have them work collaboratively, then you can get the best out of everybody in the building.
I love that approach because it does throw the very binary male, female, and it's like, hey, there's personalities, there's backstories, there's experiences that are different. It's like allowing that to be like, hey, how am I different? And that's not a that's not a bad thing. It's like, how do we meld that together and have an understanding of like a social awareness? How do we bring other people to the table who maybe are a bit more extroverted, who maybe are a little quicker to action, that can counterbalance who you are and not be like, Megha, you have to be different if you're going to be a leader in this organization. So I love that that's where your head's at, because that's what I see. Healthy teams, they do have that variety there.
Right. And it's not about, like you hear a lot about like living authentically or being your authentic self. I do think that there are certain values and behaviors and traits that I have that frankly, I don't want to change. But where I've really been humbled and learned over the last decade or so, and that's thanks to leadership that we also have here, is that just because something is the easiest way for me to communicate, that's not necessarily the best way. And I'm not compromising myself by trying to adapt to how can I get the best out of somebody else, or how can I work together best with somebody. So let's each look at what we bring to the table, but we don't need to approach it one way or the other. You can kind of meet people where they are while still being yourself.
If you think about this is more of like leading a team or in a manager type role. So for the listeners hearing, I would love to hear your input on this. Like, we find the most success whenever managers and leaders are looking at their team and they're like, hey, what do they need? And I'm not going to change who I am, but I might change my approach slightly to match where they're at. Because if I'm in a position of leadership over them, I probably do have a little bit more tenure, more experience, more background. It's like, how do I come alongside and help them thrive, even if that means being a bit more extroverted when I'm naturally introverted? I'm not going to fully switch over to the dark side of extroversion, but how do I adapt a little bit more so they can have a better chance at thriving, and I can get more out of my team?
Yeah, so it's interesting when you say that in terms of tenure, because when you look at the groups that I work with primarily, I am not actually the most experienced when it comes to IT. I don't have an IT background, and it would be foolish of me to think that I should somehow prescribe how it is that they go about doing what they're doing. My job is really to make sure that when they have questions, need direction, or have challenges, or might need to understand how something fits into the bigger picture, I'm there. And when they need resources, I help them figure out how can you make the best business case to get what it is that you need, but certainly not to tell them what to do. It's more about, hey, how can we go about it and how do we fit into the bigger picture? Same with security. We work with long tenured former police officers. I don't want to be telling them how to do their job. It would be a bad thing.
They did a great job checking all my gear, by the way.
Good. It would not be a good thing for the organization if I sat there and tried to prescribe things or expect them to do things how I approach things. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously a little bit different when it comes to the legal side, just because I have experience as a producer, but you find this, and you probably have more experience in this than I do, but you'll find that at places like that, whether it's law firms or dentist's office or other places, just because you're a professional expert doesn't at all mean that you're a good, strong leader. And so for me, it was really interesting to be able to learn both of those skills, where of course I want to continue to grow and develop as a lawyer and make sure I have my expertise there. But I really, when I came down here with the scope of the things that I was helping to manage, I've realized I need to learn how to become a better leader, manager, director, team builder, consensus builder than I had been.
One of my good friends, he's also a listener, is a president of a bank in the Midwest, and he's like, I became president because I was really good at lending. I mastered this role, and he's like, well, you can take on this new role, and I hear that all the time at higher levels of leadership. And so when you do get that title or you get to the executive level for yourself, we have a lot of executives listening. So did you find early on, or maybe even still, a little bit more of the imposter syndrome surfacing a little bit? Be like, ooh, now I have to maybe know more of the answers, or I have to be a little more put together. Like, talk about that.
Yeah, I think when I first started at the law firm, and even when I first came to the Jaguars, I remember thinking, oh, okay, this type of job is associated with a person who looks like this or drives this kind of a car, and insert or whatever else it might be, or belongs to this sort of club. And it's just never really been me. And so initially when I found myself trying to sort of fit myself into some of those things, I was like, again, if it's something that makes you happy, by all means, go and do it. But if it's not what was necessarily making me happy, I found that it was kind of draining my energy in a different way. And I was like, I would rather focus on doing the best job that I can and developing relationships that way than trying to be the best networker that I can, because it just doesn't come naturally to me. And I feel like I feel inauthentic, but I feel like the other person can also tell that it's just not
Is this
necessarily...
awkward for you too? It's awkward for me.
Yeah, that it's not the best way to build trust. But when you are helpful to people, it doesn't matter if you guys have the same interests outside of the office or not. They still want to work with you. And so it may be a little bit of a longer road towards developing relationships, but I think that it ultimately is slower, but the relationships are stronger. Because when you can build relationships through working on projects together, I think that, at least for me, is a little bit easier than trying to network or do some of the other things that people might sort of expect. And a good example is, like, I find that I really want to, we are overall a small to mid-sized business. I really do want to get to know our employees, but for me, a lot of that happens most naturally through just doing random projects or being available or eating lunch together, as opposed to necessarily trying to force it in some other way. But just spending time together and getting to know people for me was the easiest way, or working on something together.
I guess what was the most glaring leadership skill or deficit even? We all have them. I'm not picking on you.
Totally.
You could turn this around and ask me my deficits. When you stepped into this kind of industry, what were the leadership deficits early on that you just didn't have because you didn't maybe even need to have it in prior?
So I think that this is probably the number one source of stress for many people, which is that when I first started, and I think it's normal actually for about the first year of a job, because you should be listening, observing, learning. But what I found is that I was letting myself be pulled in far too many different directions, as opposed to really taking ownership of my schedule. And that doesn't mean telling people no or not being available. It means taking as much time to think about how you will accomplish something as opposed to what it is. And so in terms of stress, I think that having a lack of schedule autonomy really stresses people out. And then it becomes difficult to build in time for those things that actually relieve stress for you. And so I had to start sort of almost foundationally at looking at, okay, what is the best way to approach time management? And I've taken any number of courses and do on a regular basis just to either remind myself or learn something new about how to make sure that I'm managing my day so that I'm accomplishing the most important things, both professionally and personally, without getting pulled in the direction of meetings or other things that are important but could maybe be done a little bit more efficiently. The other piece that I've spent a lot of time just trying to understand better, because lawyers are not taught how to manage people, and you're so sort of task oriented, I think, at times, especially as a junior lawyer, where you don't necessarily need to think about those things. I am genuinely curious about how to bring out the best in performance, both in yourself and in other people. So like, if I could, and if I had to, I could sit still for 14 hours a day and read, no problem. And like, I have that level of focus. I used to find that to be pretty easy to do. And then what I learned, especially after coming down here, because our offices are in the stadium, at least for another day until we move out.
Kind of underneath?
They're under the bowl, yeah.
Yeah.
And so when I came down here and there were no windows in the office, I felt it. Like, I felt like I'm having a hard time like feeling as energized. And so about a year or two in, I would start going for walks around the stadium, which is difficult to do around a city block or around an office floor, of course, without people thinking that you're doing something odd. But what I found, and what's backed up by science, as I later learned, if you take a break, a well-placed break actually helps you think about things in a different way, helps you potentially remember things better if you learn something and then go for a walk. And so I started building in things that I thought would be good, not just for like my physical health, but I realized would also really complement my job performance. And those are things that aren't necessarily either taught to you at work or even encouraged for that matter. Fast forward to now, and we have these outdoor workstations outside that are solar powered that people want to go into. People do tend to walk around a little bit more and work around the stadium, and it's not wasted time if they are thoughtfully designed breaks to help improve performance, whether it's stimulating your brain or even just taking the time to go for a casual walk to go get to know somebody else. Or especially with something like construction going on, you never know what you're going to find. And it's really helpful, I think, to know what it is that helps you feel more energized so that you can continue to bring that level of performance, not just to your own job, but also to help other people. And realize that different things work well for different people.
Yeah, and leading in a way where there's space to accommodate other people's style there. When it comes to the people or development side of things, how are people in this organization cared for?
So I feel really strongly that development should be a part of everybody's job. And I think that if you have an executive team and leadership team that is developing themselves, other employees will see the value in it. Otherwise, it tends to be something that those trainings always fall to the bottom of the to-do list because no one's tasking you with it. And I think that developing yourself should be some schedule blocked part of everybody's job. And I think that it should be part of the conversation of, hey, not just what have you done this week, but what have you learned this week? And that can be from a training, or it could even just be from reflecting on the core work that you were doing. But so in terms of supporting our employees, we do provide them with access to a number of training resources they can do either on their own or together. But one is LinkedIn Learning, which you can listen to those courses at your leisure. I do it while walking the dogs. And I see your certifications pop up on LinkedIn. I find it to be really, part of the reason why I post them is I want other people to know that it doesn't matter. I've been practicing for 15 years. There's always still something that I can learn. And then it becomes a matter of, all right, what's the best time to do it? Now, if there is a quiz at the end, I might not get 100 every time because I am trying to build it into also getting exercise and walking the dogs, but that's okay. Like the goal is not perfection. The goal is to learn something. But we do really emphasize training and development. And of course, we have company-wide programs as well. We also recently adopted a program where a company called Be Nice comes in and trained all of our staff in how to, if you see somebody maybe struggling, what are the very simple things that you can do? You don't have to be a trained professional. What are the very simple things you can do, human to human, because you have 2 ears and a mouth to help somebody who might be struggling. And just to give them a really basic template to follow, because those things come up and we all spend a lot of time together. And if you can just have the tools and feel prepared for what would I say to somebody, peers are frankly, I'm glad that I'm trained and can be a resource for people, but I also understand that everyone may not want to come speak to the lawyer about how they're feeling at any given moment. And so I really wanted to democratize this idea that we have to take care of people. That's not an HR function. That's a company function. That's a peer function. That's a, hey, you work together and you should care about each other function. Because when people do feel like they're in a place where they can trust each other and they feel cared for, I think that leads to higher engagement, performance, business results. 1,000,000%. And so it doesn't need to be that this is some soft, squishy thing that's antithetical to the business, including the fact that we're in a pretty traditionally sort of masculine business. It helps to drive performance if you approach it the right way. Having a culture of learning, having a culture of appropriate authenticity. We've been in meetings when there's been oversharing. That's awkward. That's inappropriate. That's a lot of things. But then undersharing is also inappropriate, in my opinion. But finding that sweet spot, and it's always going to evolve because the organization's got different needs. Like we talked about earlier, people coming out of the organization, or seasonal, or for the quick service restaurant people here, the turnover, whatever it may be, it's something you constantly have to be on top of. Because as soon as you think you have it figured out, you get a new face, and you're like, okay, we gotta run it back. So I would love to, one of the reasons we initially even got connected was this idea of leadership, but also this, how are we normalizing mental health conversations in leadership spaces? That's the whole goal of this podcast for the listeners. You know that, you hear me say that all the time, but I want to bring these conversations about mental health into leadership spaces. So I know that that's a passion of yours as well. So share a little bit about why mental health. Why is that important to you? Share what you want to share, but just give them a little bit of understanding of why that's an area of passion for you. Sure. So I noticed when I started here that I did have a little bit of a skills gap in terms of I didn't necessarily know what to say to somebody who would come to us saying, I'm feeling suicidal, my partner's suicidal, I'm in a domestic violence situation, my child has an eating disorder. And I was very much of the mindset that I think a lot of people are of advice giving in that mode. And I realized at some point, I'm like, I don't think this is actually as effective as I think it might be. And I know that if people give me advice when I'm in that situation, I don't always take it. I was like, okay, so what am I missing? And so in 2018, I got trained through an organization called Crisis Text Line as a crisis counselor. And what a blessing that was, because I use those skills not just on the platform and volunteering, which is incredibly gratifying when you get feedback from someone that you've been able to help them through a difficult time. But I was using those skills every day, both at work and at home. And it helps because they teach you, and you have more experience in this than I do, but they teach you as, again, a person who's not going to go get a degree, but here is the structure to a conversation to help de-escalate someone who might be in crisis. And because I like being prepared as much as I possibly can, I found that to be really helpful. Like, yes, I hope that I'm a human being with empathy to some degree, but it doesn't necessarily have to be just, hey, go with your gut or go with what's intuitive to you. And I think a lot of crisis intervention is actually the opposite of that in terms of it's not necessarily intuitive, but there is a science-based formula for how you can help calm somebody down. And what I loved about that was that it really, instead of saying, hey, well, I have it all together so I can give you advice, I know that even if you may be having a difficult moment, there's a smart human in there. There's a capable human in there, and there's one who knows what will be best for you. And so learning how to have the conversation where you draw out of somebody what would be the best solution for them in the moment, as opposed to just giving advice. So that was tremendous and helpful, and I did find it to be really professionally helpful. It then sort of, in part during COVID, became forced for me to talk about personally for this reason. So in May of 21, and this was, I was part of our leadership group leading our response during COVID. And I like to think that one of my superpowers is that no matter what else is going on, and frankly, even when the temperature goes up even further, I'm able to stay calm. May 21st of 21, someone broke into my house at night while I was asleep. And so I woke up to him standing over me, punched him in the throat, thanks to like the one self-defense class that I had taken in my life that just in the back of my head, it was like, well, this is a sensitive spot. Ran out, went into my neighbor's place, because they'd heard me screaming, which I didn't even realize that I was doing. And I remember looking at him and saying, I need air. I don't know what to do right now. I can't really talk right now. I'm definitely out of sorts, but I need air. Because I just learned that like breathing, right, and getting oxygen back to your brain is one of the best ways to be able to calm your nervous system. And so I went outside, I called the police, dealt with it, and somehow made it to work at 9 o'clock the next day anyway, just because there was an employee issue that I really wanted to make sure that I was in for. And what a good way to sort of kind of keep yourself in perspective, which is needing to go help somebody else in that moment was probably one of the best things that could have happened to me. But what I realized in the short term afterwards, in part what I had known from the training, but also in part of just what my own mind and body were experiencing, was I don't know that I'm going to be the same exactly. So I don't want to be making critical, important decisions without being self-aware about maybe I need to be a little bit more sensitive to the time of those decisions, because now my sleep's really disrupted. Yeah. There's a lot of people who come to me for things, and if I'm not in a calm state, I'm not going to be able to give them good counsel or good feedback or good advice. And so I shared with everybody what had happened, and the response was truly tremendous in terms of a lot of people. I think that being able to sort of work through it together as an organization in terms of, okay, something really bad happened to me. And I realized that people might be uncomfortable asking me about it, but they might be anxious about it. I'm obviously anxious about it in my own mind. It's like, I need to use myself as an example for, okay, if someone goes through something, here's what it is. I'm happy talking about it, but I just need to be a little bit prepared. Hey, I'm a little bit more jumpy in crowds. I might need a coworker or someone to be with me from here on out. And I think that people really saw that. They appreciated the honesty, and they were incredibly supportive around that time. And my hope is that it opened up the opportunity for other people where I thought, people might look at me as weak or think that, oh, she can't come back from this or she can't keep on doing her job. Because I was so honest at what I might be feeling and on certain days, the limits of my capacity, people really appreciated that. And I think it hopefully gave space for other people to realize too, like, hey, you can be a human being that deals with those things that human beings deal with and still be a high performer. They are not mutually exclusive. When you're aware of the things that might be going on and then able to manage them, I think it actually contributes to better performance.
Wow. I hadn't heard all the details around it, but thank you for sharing.
Of course.
My mind goes to this idea of like, had you not stepped up and said, hey, here's what happens. People are seeing the behaviors, or seeing you operate a bit differently.
Yeah.
And no one likes uncertainty or like mysteries. And so
Right.
people create narratives.
Right.
And so then as a leader, you're susceptible. You think you're doing a healthy thing by not sharing, but yet now we've got 300 people who have 300 different stories of why I'm a certain way.
Right.
That gets complex, confusing, negates my influence as a leader versus just owning it in an appropriate way.
I think I was able to recover faster by being honest about the fact that, hey, sometimes I might just need to take 10 minutes and go for a quick walk and listen to some music by myself.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm not quite as comfortable in the immediate aftermath with strangers approaching me. Hey, I work in live events. I'm not quite as comfortable in crowds. Probably the funniest moment was a week later, just about a week to the day later, the family's wrestling company was filming out of here, and it was getting pretty late, and around 3 a.m, they had run out of extras for a scene, and they said, me and a handful of other staff members were around like, hey, can you guys be in this scene?
Please tell me you got in the ring.
I did not get in the ring. I was just sitting in one of the club areas, but similar to this, sitting in a chair, and my entire job was to, hey, as soon as they start fighting towards you, get out of the scene and run away. So we did the first take, and again, everyone had known at this point what had gone on, but we're there, and we did the first take, and the producer looks at me and goes, you ran away too fast. And I was just exhausted at that point, and I said, this is why I'm alive, guys. I was like, it's a week out. I was like, why are we but it was very funny. But again, being able to do that together and everybody laughing, like, you can acknowledge that some things are hard without, when it gets to be so hard, but then you're alone and it's dark, I think that gets to be much more difficult than when you can just talk to people about it.
We talk to so many leaders who are high up in the organization, and they're, you talked about being alone. They're incredibly lonely. Loneliness at the top of organizations is rampant.
Yeah.
And so having moments of where you can show your humanity or show your flaws, or again, at appropriate levels, is so important when it comes to staying connected to the rest of the organization.
Well, and I'm not the best at this, but I know how good I feel when somebody comes to me and asks for help, right? Because I am able to do something for somebody else. I'm able to help them, right? Whether it's a coworker, a friend, whatever else it might be. And shame on me for not realizing that, well, that also means that rather than thinking that somehow my stuff, whatever else it might be, is going to be a burden, why not ask for help? Like, that does build relationships. That does make other people feel good, and it gives them a chance to be a part of something that they might otherwise get to be. And so I think for a lot of leaders, sometimes they also feel like, well, I need to be the strongest. I need to be the most capable. I need to make it seem like I have all the answers. Whereas a lot of times I think that people are just as comforted by hearing, I don't know, as opposed to silence. I think silence is what drives people just to, as you said, form their own narratives and then come up with stories in their own minds.
And I think, too, even just acknowledging, it was really interesting. You mentioned the aftermath of your own vulnerability. How many conversations came on the other side of your vulnerability with people?
Quite a bit. For some people, it was a little bit jarring, but I think it was also really comforting then to realize that, hey, this can be jarring, but you can work through it. And so there are some really bizarre things that I did. And sometimes I was hesitant to share them because I thought, well, I don't want someone to think that I've lost it. But I watched Beauty and the Beast, the old animated one, every night for about a month. So I usually read before bed, but just couldn't, was just too tired to read. And so I did that. And I remember someone asked me, what are you doing? And I was like, there's no surprises. It's really comforting because it has this nostalgic element to it, and it makes me feel better and helps me fall asleep. So who cares? If it's a healthy way for me to just process and for my brain to rest, who cares? And so then a month in, I graduated to romantic comedies or something like that. And then I now am back to reading before bed, but just giving yourself the grace to realize that, okay, maybe your brain or body is doing something different right now. Let me try and find a way to make my life easier. I also got to the point where I was writing down everything. It was wake up, drink coffee, get dressed, go to work. Because what I found is, again, because my brain was tired, which I think that mine was in the aftermath of trauma, but I think that what I'm saying really applies to anyone who's busy. Save your mental energy for those things that are higher functioning and try and make as much of the rest as possible routine or easy. And a well-worn routine for me is the surefire way to ensure that I will have time for freedom and creativity, as opposed to thinking that the routine is so rigid that, it's somehow
suffocating
holding
or-
me
yeah.
back. Yeah, it's not. A groove can become a rut, but I think that if you have just some sort of basic principles in place, I still use my GPS to get to the stadium every morning. I've lived in the same spot, but it's just helpful. It's one less thing to have to think about so that I'm saving that energy for something else.
I know you mentioned before around volunteering with kind of crisis work. Share a little bit more of the skills that you learned that equipped you to volunteer in that way. Speak specifically how you've incorporated that.
I have found that because of the way that they encourage you to explore with the person who's in crisis, what's going on, what is most painful for them. So a lot of times people have multiple things that are impacting at once, but if you can focus on what is the thing that's most painful for them, understand what's driving it. And then the first question before recommending any outside resources is, have you ever felt this way before? And if so, has anything been helpful to you? Now, sometimes the answer to that question is no, but a lot of times the answer is yes. And I just forgot, right? Because I am in this sort of more challenged state. I feel like the same principle, just in terms of if you're speaking with someone, learning how to really listen and I'm guilty of it, not listening to what am I going to add in next? When is it going to be my turn to speak? How am I going to respond? Listening to really hear, understand, and do it in a non-judgmental way. I think that that's incredibly helpful in negotiations. It's really helpful when you're trying to build a deal. When you want to make sure that everyone walks away, whether it's a dispute or a transaction, when you want to make sure that everyone walks away, at least with having their sort of most important needs met, what a great way to learn that, which requires asking a lot of questions and understanding where they're coming from and what's important to them, as opposed to assuming that you know the answer to that. To me, that's a great tool for business, especially for negotiations.
To truly be heard it conjures up such a strong emotion that's so hard to separate from feeling loved.
Yeah.
It's like when you truly feel heard, everything inside of us, the brain lights up in the same area as if like my loved one just walked in, I haven't seen him for a month. It's like there's something about being heard that goes such a long way. And I find that in my work in leadership, but also in the clinical side, it's, man, just pausing your words and giving someone the freedom and the dignity of being heard goes such a long way.
Yeah.
And it can really improve someone's situation.
I think that it empowers them to feel, one, not alone, and two, not so unique in terms of what their challenge is. Like, that's one of the best parts about volunteering, which is that I don't care who you are. I don't care how much money you have or don't have. At the end of the day, people are going to have some hard times that come up, and learning how to just sit with them in it and help them through it without trying to push them towards a solution, which again, took me a long time to learn how to do too. And I'm really grateful for the training for that. I've found made it a lot easier. And your definition of success changes. It's not necessarily fixing, right? It's, hey, let me see if I can provide an ear. Let me see if I can make somebody seem heard. And then some people may just need a little bit more time. Some people, you may not necessarily be able to course correct for them, but that's the point, right? Is learning that success is helping them have the tools so that when they are ready and when they are able, they can course correct.
Obviously, we're wrapping up an incredible season. It's not over yet, right? Big plans for the Jaguars this year. You've made a Jaguars fan out of my family, for sure. Just being here yesterday and just the culture was incredible in the stands. And so, do you travel with the team? Like, do you go to all the away games? Like, I want to talk a little bit about the away game weeks. What's that look like for you?
Sure. So I used to before COVID. And then once COVID hit and you had to get tested every single day, I was like, I don't know that I necessarily want to.
I will support you from a
do
distance.
that. Yes, exactly. But it was also true that the responsibilities were different, right? So it was a bigger lift to get this facility ready. We had wrestling here for 18 months. And so it was just a different situation. Now I sort of have the flexibility of, hey, if there's a place where I want to go because it's a facility I haven't seen because they've done renovations or capital improvements, then I'll go. But I also otherwise, so much of it to me is about what is the most important thing, that my colleagues trust me and see me as competent and useful. And that a lot of the time, being on the road really helped give me a picture into what that life is like for them. What does it mean for them when August to through the end of January, maybe February, they are gone from their families. They're working really hard. It gave me a really different appreciation for that. And what it means when Saturday at noon until Sunday at whatever time you're back is gone during that time period. But now I'm more selective about it, but still make sure I try and build relationships with them in other ways so that they still see me, hopefully, when the first time is not when there is a problem, but rather in some more positive environment. And, we used to all be business and football in the same building. Football moved out into the training facility in the summer of 23. Business will be across the street, but it's not far at all. But what it will mean is that when we are not in the physical same place, we need to do more to feel connected. So we can't just continue to have the same cadence of meetings or the same type or structure as we're going to be physically disparate, because you've lost those incidental connections that come up. And so trying to be thoughtful about how can we replicate that in a different way so that that physical space doesn't then impact the business's ability to work together.
Other than this remarkable stadium, what's some of your favorite stadiums out there in the league?
Oh, gosh. There's so many that are also different, but I love MetLife, but in part because I grew up a Jets fan. I really like Kansas City. Like, what an incredible environment that is to be in. And they've obviously
They're
done
about to move.
tremendous renovations over time and have sustained for a long time there. Went to Vegas in April, which is just that one. The connection to the Strip is really, really special. Like, you are in the stadium. It's a great stadium, but you also feel so connected to Vegas, and you can walk up to it, which is unique. And so, look, I think so much of it is a combination of like the facility and the fan base, as you felt yesterday too, where it impacts. They sort of work together.
When you think about the next, I guess, season of your own leadership, I know we talked about kind of what got you here. I don't know, how do you anticipate your own leadership evolving and growing in the not so distant future?
I remember when I first got this job, I was 27 years old, and there were times where I
don't think we said you've been here 12, 13 years. 13 years, okay.
So there's a lot of people would ask me to do things. And frankly, like, in just in terms of speaking about my role or other things, I'm like, I felt it at the time where I was like, I don't know that I have enough experience to actually intelligently opine on things as it relates to leadership and management in the same way. A decade in, I feel differently. Like, I do feel like I have the experience. But at that time, I felt like I was in such a position where I had to learn, where for me now, like, when people ask, hey, I want to get into sports, what can I do? And as you said, a lot of people think about what's on the field. I now have such a more robust sense of what is actually involved in the business, right? The different jobs there are. And so for me at this point, I feel like I am in a better position to be able to help from a more informed perspective, actually share a little bit about my experience, share a little about what's worked, what hasn't, both for me and for others over the course of time. And, I hope to encourage people that, like, it doesn't matter what you look like, because no one would have thought that I would necessarily belong here, right? Besides the people that had some faith in my work product and thought that I could do the job. And so I'm grateful for that. And I hope just to, more than anything, be able to show other people that don't be limited by the bounds of your own thinking. Like, I'm a pretty risk-averse person. And so there was a chance where I really wouldn't have come down to Jacksonville. What I had to do is tell myself, okay, if I take this job, what's the worst thing that could happen? I don't like it, or I'm not good at it, and I need to come back and live in my parents' basement and get a new job. Fine. But thinking of it that way helped, because it allowed me to take the risk without being so worried about the adverse consequences. And then the other piece is, look, I've had a pretty non-traditional path, but I think more people probably have than not in the end. But I also want people to know, like, look, like, I left New York when I was 27 and was single and didn't get married till I was 39. And that's sort of sometimes hard for people just in terms of understanding the why and, it taking a little bit longer to do things. But I just at some point had to realize that, I want to do the best job that I can, and I want to be really effective at it. But I don't want to just do things because I should do them. I want to do things because they really bring me or other people joy. And at this point, I was weeding last week at some point, like, while we were home. And I said, because I'm like of this like immigrant parent mindset of, you don't pay people to do things that you can do yourself. Which is true generally, like, I get that, and there's absolute virtues in hard work. But I was like, you know what? I'm at the point where unless I'm doing something that's bringing joy, or I'm doing something that's helping to, like, make money, I should outsource this to someone, because then that will free up the time for me to be able to do these other things. And frankly, it gives someone else work. So, like, it is not the best use of my time to, like, frustrate myself while trying to pull out weeds. Let me give that to somebody else, and let me at least try and learn how to do some other things or help in some other way that I might not otherwise have the time to do. What
a great way to kind of close out the conversation too. I know we talked before and then afterwards, just the power of lifelong learning, and just having a posture of, hey, the things you're learning now all along your way has equipped you for that next season. And so for those listening, just that kind of mindset carries you through. So, well, how are you learning? I know that she shared several ways in which back to reading and experiences and all these certifications and trainings you're doing that are, so leaning into those is incredibly important. So, but I thank you. I thank you for sharing your story. And I love talking to leaders that are talking about these kind of things.
And I will say that, like, the last thing I'll leave it with is that, learning can be fun. It doesn't just have to be learning things that are core to your job, because I do alternate between fiction and nonfiction, because I find that the fiction is still interesting and relevant and always is viewed through your own lens. But probably one of the hardest things that I've had to learn was in 2018, right around the time that I also was learning how to become a crisis counselor. I've been playing guitar since I was a kid, but not very well. And I was like, okay, what is the thing that I am the worst at and that I would never want to do, which is play in front of other people. And so I never did. And so finally in 2018, I, in my room, like an angsty teenager with the door closed, practiced for a few months and then went and played at a dive bar down the street for a couple hours. Hardest thing that I do, and I thought I'd be one and done. I do it once a year only because it's a really good reminder. Listen, I'm not by any means going to quit my day job.
My guitar.
I'm not going to be like, I'm never going to make a living from this, but I can do it because it brings me joy. And when you hit the right song that other people also like granted to me and the 12 people at whatever dive bar it is that I'm playing at once a year, it's really fun. And it's a good reminder, for me at least, that you can do things and you don't need to be excellent at them. You don't need to be the best at them. But if you approach it with heart and joy, learn that. Having to do that makes me really good at getting used to being uncomfortable. And that's where I think growth comes from.
Well, you triggered a follow-up question. What are some of your go-to songs that you play in the dive bar once a year?
Oh, gosh. Well, so I like a little bit of everything. I'm guilty of that to some degree. But so it's everything from this most recent time. There was a lot of 90s nostalgia, Green Day, Fall Out Boy that I tried to build in. Of course, some good Taylor Swift.
Oh, yeah.
Bob Seger. And so it's a little bit of everything, actually. But yeah, there's not one go-to. I similarly like hearing songs and trying to learn them.
Well, there we go. Get your guitar out. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having my family. Thanks for your time today. And looking forward to the listeners getting to hear a little bit about your story.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.